Greetings, my name is Tony, and welcome to video number 7 of the Megaman tutorial series, where together we're creating a Megaman style game in Unity. In this video we're going to be creating a replica of the enemy Mambu the Flying Shell. So let's take a look at what you're going to have by the end of this video. So what Mambu does is he travels horizontally across the screen. Let's go into invincibility so that we don't die. And while he's traveling, his shell is closed, and when he stops, his shell opens and fires a spray of 8 bullets in all sorts of different directions. And while his shell is closed, he's actually invincible. But when his shell opens, then he's vulnerable to death. So we're going to replicate that, and let's get started. Okay, so when we left off, we had created Peppy and Killer Bomb in the last video. And so if you're now joining us, what you can do is go to my GitHub and download Project 6, which was the last video, if you're just joining us, and then you can be where we're at now. Otherwise, if you've been following from the first video, you should be up to this point where we're now going to be creating Mambu. So what we're going to do first is I'm going to get this out of the way, and we don't need Peppy and Killer Bomb since we're going to be creating a new enemy. So we're going to highlight all those and just disable them. We're not going to delete them. We're going to leave them in the scene, but we're not going to use them. We don't want to delete them. So first thing we're going to do is we need the images. Now, but before we do that, let's watch a video of the actual Mambu in action from the original NES Megaman. Let's play that in VLC. So this is the actual Mambu. This is what we're going to replicate. So he flies across the screen, he opens up his shell, sprays his bullets, and while his shell is closed, he's actually invincible, so you can shoot him, he won't die. But when his shell opens up, he's vulnerable, so you can actually shoot him and kill him. So at some point here, I have that happen. It should be around about now. There. So he dies there. But there you see he's invincible when you hit him when his shell's closed. And when his shell's open, he's not. He's not invincible. So let's close that. We don't need that anymore. And so first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to graphics, and we're going to go to that enemy's sprite sheet that we've been using, and then open up the Sprite Editor. The bottom left of the sheet, we have all the bullets. There's actually a red bullet, and it's more of a bittersweet, but I'm going to call it pink. So pink bullet, green, blue, and orange. So we're going to grab those first because we're going to need those, especially this one here for Mambu, but other enemies shoot other bullet colors, so we're just going to grab them all for right now. So let's start with that first one. We're going to call it Bullet Red. This next one, Bullet Pink, Bullet Green, Bullet Blue, and last but not least, which is going to be Bullet Orange. Okay, so now we have our bullets. Next, we're going to need Mambu himself, which is just these two sprites here, when he's closed, when he's open. There's no transitional animations in between. It's just closed or open. That's it. So let's get the closed one. Drag that up. Now we're going to keep his pivot in the center. So the way it is now on the closed is fine. So we're going to rename that to Mambu closed, and we're going to leave these settings as they are. However, on the open, if we just drag this over real quick, you're going to notice that the pivot's going to be here, but once we create our outline around it, it puts it up here, up where his pupil is. So we're going to change the pivot on this sprite. So Mambu opened. We're going to change it to custom. Let's just move it to the center down there so we can drag it. And then we're going to grab that and then drag it up here to where we saw from the other one when we dragged over. So his pivot's about there. And we're going to change these values. So approximately where that corner is, it's roughly about 0.53 on the X and 0.38 on the Y. So you can punch those in and then apply that. So those are our two sprites for our animations. So we're done with the sheet. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to have to make a couple changes to our enemy controller class to accommodate the actions that he can perform. So we're going to go to scripts, go to enemy controller, and inside of enemy controller, the first thing we want to do is, originally I had these all as serialized. Well, I'm going to change them to public, so in case we ever want to access them from the any other scripts, we're going to make them public. So we're going to change those first, and the same with the prefab. Sometimes as you're programming things, you kind of have to go back and make little tweaks here and there. So this is one that we're going to do for the enemy controller. So we're going to bring that down there. So the first thing we're going to define is a new public int. And much like our player controller had, we're going to create this one called bullet damage. And because he shoots bullets, we're going to initialize that to 1. And then we're going to create a public float called bullet speed for the speed of the bullets. We're going to default all bullets to travel at 3. Next, we're going to create 2 public game objects. And the first one's going to be called bullet shoot pause, or for bullet shoot position. And the next one is going to be a game object as well, and that's going to actually be for the bullet prefab. So this is what your script will be like at the end, at the top. We're not going to actually do anything below this, so we're going to save those changes, and this is what we need to have. So we need the damage, how fast. I just clean these up into publics, and we're going to create 2 new, a shoot position and a prefab. So save that, and then we're going to go back over to Unity. And now we're going to create Mambu himself. We're going to start with the game objects. Okay, so we're going to right click over there and create new empty. We're going to call it Mambu. And first thing, we're going to 0 this out. We're going to change the scale because everything from that sprite sheet's a little small, so we're going to change the scale to 1.5. And then we're going to go to change the tag to enemy and the layer to enemy. Then what we're going to do is we're going to create a child of that, which we've been doing for all our enemies. We're going to create one called hitbox. And on the hitbox, the layer is going to be default and no tag, so that, because we know that our enemy and player layers don't collide with each other. We made that change a while back. So we got to make sure that this does, we have that setting here. And next, well, then we're going to also add on the box collider because we need that for the hitbox. Next, we're going to create another empty off of Mambu, and we're going to call it bullet shoot pause. We're going to drag that above the hitbox, just for alphabetical. And this is layer enemy, which is fine because we don't want it to. We want it to be ignored with the player if it collides with the player as well, because the hitbox is the only thing that's going to be checking for collisions. And the only thing that we want out of this is the transform, so we don't add any other components onto this. So all we care about is the transform on this. This is going to basically denote where our bullets are going to basically fire from. So it's technically in the center of the sprite, but actually it's going to be originating from where the pivot is. So right where his eye is, which is basically the center of where we created for when his shell is open. So you'll see that in action later. Now that we have Mambu, what we're going to do is we're going to drag the enemy controller onto that main object, and it's going to drop in all our components. So first component we're going to edit is the rigid body. Now we're going to control all his movement through code, so we're going to change him to kinematic. Collision is going to be continuous, it never sleeps. We're going to lock the Z, and we're also going to lock the Y, because all he does is travel horizontally. So he doesn't do any vertical movement. So we're going to lock the Y on that. Next, we're going to go to the sprite renderer, go to your graphics folder, and expand the enemies, and we're going to drop in Mambu closed as the sprite. So, and then change his layer order to 10. So let's go over, let's bring this over real quick. And then we can zoom in here. So there, oops. So click on and then press F to focus in on it. So there is Mambu when he's closed. So we can get that back out of the way right now. And then we're going to go to the box collider, right click on the title of it and reset it. Because now, we should bring that back over real quick. Let's just drag this over, shrink this down. There. So we're going to edit the box collider. So now when we reset it, it puts it resizes the bounding box around the image. So with this, we're going to bring in the box within the first pixel around, so inside of the black outline, and we're going to change these values. So he's going to come out to 0, 0 on the X and Y, and 0.14 and 0.14 on the X and the Y of the size. And now that we have that, we're going to go to the hitbox, and those are actually the same values. So 0.14, 0.14, and we're going to make it a trigger. And we're going to save all that. Just move that out of the way real quick. Go back to Mambu, and then we're going to set up the enemy controller values. So let's go over to the website. This is the website we've been getting our data from, Fandom. So Mambu has a point value of 800. He has 1 health. If Megaman gets hit by one of his shots, it takes off 2. If Megaman happens to touch him, then it takes off 1. So those are the values that we're going to plug in. So he's worth 800. He has 1 health, 1 contact damage. When he explodes, actually, there's no touch, so there's no explosion damage. Bullet damage, we know, is 2. The speed, we're going to leave at 3 for now. And the audio clips under sounds, we need enemy damage, the dink for the block, the shoot, which is number 10, the shoot position, which we defined in the enemy controller. So we're going to drag that game object over there. The prefab for the bullet, we're going to get to this in a sec. But basically, we're going to be using the same bullet as Megaman, but we're going to actually be editing our bullet class to have a little bit more functionality. So we're going to go over to prefabs, projectiles, and drag the bullet into the bullet prefab. And the explode effect under prefabs and effects is the small explosion. So we're going to drag that number 1 over there. So those are all the properties for the enemy controller. Now we need to create a script So this is going to control Mambu and give him his AI, his logic, his movement, and everything. So we're going to go in scripts folder, just right click in there, new C# script, and call it Mambu Controller. And then with that, we'll go back over to the Mambu game object. Come on. You scroll all the way back down and drag that script onto the right. And then double click on it to open it up in Visual Studio, and we're going to leave that open for right now. Go back over to Unity. So now we're going to create his animations. So on the left, scroll back up to under Assets, Animations, and then go into Enemies, create a new folder, right click, and we're going to call it Mambu. And inside of Mambu, go inside and right click. You're going to create a single animator controller, call it Mambu. And we're going to create two animations. So first animation is Mambu when he's closed. And the second animation is Mambu when he's open. So first thing, we don't need loop time. So on both these animations, we don't need loop time because it's basically just a single frame. So you can ignore putting a check on that. So double click on the animation controller, go back over to Project tab, highlight the closed animation, and then go back to the Animator tab, right click, create state from clip, and then go back over to Project, highlight open, go back to the Animator tab, right click again, and from selected clip to bring in the open one. So now the animator has both of those animations tied to it. Go back to the Project tab, go back to Mambu game object. Come on. And over here in the animator, you're going to drag the animation into that. So now we can define the animations. Okay, first thing first is set one for the sample on closed and open, because they're only single frames. And then back over on closed, you're going to go over to the graphics folder, and then underneath our enemies, look for Mambu closed, and you're going to drag that sprite in there. And then under open animation, you're going to drag in the Mambu open. All right, so now we're going to bring this back over. We're going to need this to see some stuff. So when Mambu is closed, that is actually the default size of the box collider and the hit box. So we don't need to make any changes on this closed animation. However, when we're open, if we preview that, you see it doesn't actually cover his entire area. Excuse me. So we're going to need to edit that. So with open selected in preview, hit the record button, and then over on the right of the bounding box, hit that edit collider. We're going to bring that up and this over to the left. And then we're going to change these values. So for the offset X, it's going to be negative 0.005. And for the offset Y, it's going to be 0.025. Over on the size X, we're going to make it 0.15. And on the size Y, we're going to make it 0.19. So over on the game object, hit the hitbox child. And we're going to change the offsets on those two, same thing. So you can drag that up, or you can just punch them in. But we're going to drag it first. So it was negative 0.005, and then positive 0.025, and then 0.15, and 0.19. So with that done, you can stop recording. So now when we're closed, our box is that size, and when we're open, our box is now the size of when his sprite is opened. So we're going to save that. So Mambu's as done as we can make him for right now. So what we're going to do next is we're going to make changes to the BulletScript. So go over to Scripts and open up the BulletScript. So with the BulletScript, we need to, originally when I started designing the engine, I made a copy called Mini BulletScript, or Mini Bullet, I forgot what I called it. It was basically pretty much like a copy of the BulletScript. So the BulletScript was used by Megaman and the enemies used the Mini Bullet. So I didn't want to go that route with this video. I want to introduce a couple new things that we can try out. So we're going to edit the actual same BulletScript, and we're going to make it where either Megaman or the enemy can use it, and we're going to expand it where we're going to be able to pick which sprite we want to use, scale of the sprite itself, radius for the collisions, etc. So that's what we're going to do in this video. So first thing we need to do is we're going to add a circle collider called CC2D, and this is going to basically be used to define the size of our radius of how big our circle is that's going to be for the collision of the bullet, because we know our bullets right now, they're all circles, so we're going to use a circle instead of a box collider. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to define a serialized field. Now this serialized field is going to be a string array, and what this is going to do, we're going to call it, let's create it first. We're going to call it collide with tags, and we're going to default it to the name or to the word enemy. So what we're going to be able to do is through code and in the inspector, but although we instantiate each bullet, so it's really mostly just through code. This variable is going to define which tags we want our bullets to collide with. So it could be more than one, that's why we make it an array. But right now it's really only going to either collide with the player or it's going to collide with the enemy, those two tags. So that's the point of this, and you'll see how it's used in a little bit. Next, we're going to create a public enum called bullet types. And this is basically, if you haven't used enums before, we used enums with the direction. It's kind of like a indexed naming deal, where you basically provide names, but each name is basically a zero-based index. So first one we're going to put in as default, which is going to default to Megaman's bullet. So that's really what the default is. Outside of the default, we're going to have one called Mini Blue. That's the Mini Blue bullet, the sprite that we pulled out. I call one Mini Green, Mini Orange, Mini Pink, and Mini Red. Now these are all going to be alphabetical because this is how we're going to define the next part. And with those, we're going to create a serialized field of type bullet types, and we're going to call it bullet type, and we're going to default it to default. So it's going to default to the bullet that Megaman uses. All right, so next we're going to introduce creating a struct or a structure. So we're going to say public struct. You'll see how this is used. We're going to call it BulletStruct. And inside the BulletStruct, we're going to have actually three public fields. First public field is going to be of a sprite, and we're going to call it Sprite. So this is going to hold the image of the bullet, so we know what image for which bullet we want to use. The next one is going to be a float, and this is going to be the radius of that bullet. So we're going to call it public float radius. And the next one is going to be a vector 3, which is the scale, which is going to be how basically the transform scale of that bullet. But before we can actually be able to access this, we have to prefix this with system.serializable. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to get to this through the inspector. Then we're going to follow that with a serialized field of BulletStruct, but it's actually going to be an array of BulletStruct bullet structures. We're going to call that bullet data. So with all these set, we're going to now, we need to add in the circle collider. And then after that, we're going to create a call to a function that we haven't defined yet, which is called setBulletType. And it's going to be that bullet type variable that we have above that's right now at default. So then we're going to scroll down after update, and we're going to create a new public function, which is a void, and it's going to be that set bullet type, and it's going to be of bullet types, and we're going to call it type. Put a space there or a line break. So what we're going to do in here is we're going to set the bullet structure is going to basically assign the sprite, the radius, and the scale. So we're going to access that we have up here from our components, our animator. Well, we don't use the animator, but we could later if we were to enhance this. The circle collider, the rigid body, the sprite, but we don't use a rigid body either. But we do use the sprite, and we use the circle collider, and we use the transforms local scale. So over here we're going to use sprite.sprite. So this is the property of the sprite component. And what we're going to do is we're going to access bullet data. And what we do is actually since those are all enums, they're technically named integers. So we're going to access the integer value of the bullet of what we're passing to this. And then we're going to get the sprite of that. So whichever array element we're going to get from bullet data, we're going to get its sprite. Then we're going to do the same thing for the radius on the circle collider. So bullet data type dot radius. So we're going to assign the radius to the circle collider. And the last one, which is the transforms local scale. Let's see, bullet data, integer, type, and then we called it scale in our structure. So this is going to be setting the bullet type, and it's going to set the components of that from whatever's in the array. So next, we're going to come down to after set destroy delay, and here we're going to create another public void. We're going to call it set collide with tags, and we're going to pass it string array, or it doesn't necessarily have to be an array, it could just be a single string, but it could expect an array and handle an array. And we're going to call that variable tags, and then we're going to say we're going to set those tags to whatever that is. So we can call this and say what tags do we want our bullet to collide with. And the last bit we're going to do is we're going to modify our Ontrigger. So what we're going to do is we're going to just bring this down, and what we're going to have to do is we're going to step through each of those tags that have been set with the set collide with tags. So we're going to for each through that, and then we're going to do a comparison. And we're going to check and see if that's a tag that we want to check against. And then what we're going to do is we're going to use a switch statement with the only two cases that we're going to handle for now. So we want to see if the tag is enemy or the tag is player. So this is pretty similar to what we have down here, except it's going to basically be able to handle multiple tags. So it could be one, or it could be many, or it can, so it's going to check and see if it's enemy or player. So maybe later down the road we want our bullet to collide with a wall. So that would be like another tag that we can add in the parameter list, which would be wall. So maybe part of the wall will start, taking bullets, and part of it will explode and little chunks will fall out. Think something like that. So that's going to be able to handle multiple tags. So what we're going to do here, though, is we're going to take this, we're going to cut that, and that's going to go after the switch. So whichever tag we happen to collide, compare against, we're still going to destroy the game object. So we're going to destroy after it compare, if it matches a tag, we're going to destroy it. So it's very similar to what we had before. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take our enemy code here, and that's going to go into the enemy case. This is now useless, so we're going to get rid of that. Now we have to handle the player. And with the player, what we're going to do is we're going to get a player controller, and then we're going to use other dot game object dot get component player controller. We're going to check if player isn't null. And first thing, it's basically just like enemy. So player, we're going to assign damage to the player. However, in the case of the player, we also have one other thing that we need to do, and that's the hit side, so that we know what side the player was hit on, so that when they get that collision, it'll repel them in the opposite direction. So with that, we're going to use the transform position of the bullets X and see if it's greater than the player's transform X. So remember, hit side is expecting it to be right side to be true. So if the bullet's X is greater than the player's X, which means the bullet's on the right side of the player, and this evaluates true, then hit side will be true. Otherwise, it'll think it's left side and it'll be false. And then he'll repel in the correct direction from when he gets hit. So that is all that there is to change with the BulletScript. So we added all these new variables up at the top, added a couple functions, and we modified our trigger collision function. So with that, then we're going to go back over to Unity, and we need to make some changes to our bullet prefab. So let's get this out of the way. And we're going to go over to prefabs and projectiles, and we're going to open up the bullet by double clicking it. So now, if you go all the way to the bottom, our BulletScript here, these were all of our original properties: the damage, the speed, the direction, and the destroy. Now we have some new properties. So the first one we have is collide with tags. We're going to leave it on enemy default, so we're not going to mess with that. However, if you wanted to change that to 2, you could put in multiple defaults, but we only care about colliding with the enemy. And then the bullet type, so if we hit our drop down, you see we have default, mini blue, green, orange, pink, and red. So default's going to be Megaman's bullet, and then these are all those small bullets that we got. So we can change up our bullets. And then this last one is actually the structure that we created for the bullet. Now we have 6 bullet entries here, so we're going to change the size of this to 6. So now we have 6 elements, and if we expand just the first one for right now, we have a sprite, a radius, and a scale. So these are the elements of that bullet struct that we created. And we have 6 array elements of that. So what is going to happen is now we're going to set each of these up with each of those bullets. So when we pick this, then we'll know how to index which of these elements to pull the properties of that bullet so we can change our bullet up. So first one we know is, we're going to go to graphics, and the first one by default we want is Megaman's bullet. So we're going to drag the bullet over there. Originally we knew that the radius that we calculated for the size of that bullet was 0.035, and there is no scale change on Megaman's bullet, it's just 1. So that one is done. So we're going to expand, close that up, and we're going to expand the rest of these. And the thing about the rest of these, they share a lot of all the same properties. So we know that on that sprite sheet, everything is basically 1.5. So what we're going to do is we're going to paste that into all these scales. Okay. And the radius, let me bring this over so you can see how we can calculate that. So we'll scroll this over to the top, and we're going to go over here. Let's just drag in the sprite render of the blue bullet. So if you see here, this was the original bullet's radius. So what you can do is to calculate or to figure out, you can check it out, but I came up with 0.025. I think that's the best. It's much like Megaman's bullet radius. So that's how you can figure out what you're going to use for the next ones. And we'll put that back to default, and we'll move that back out of the way. So down here, all of these bullets are going to be 0.025. So we're going to copy that, drop that, drop that, drop that. So drop that and all the radiuses. So now we're going to set the sprites. So you're just basically going to follow the exact thing. That's why we made them all alphabetical, to keep it easy. So blue, green, orange, pink, and red. So the first one is going to be blue, then green, then orange, then pink, and finally red. So now we have all of our bullets set up, and when we choose our type and we use our code, we're going to be able to select which bullet that we want to actually be shown when it's being fired. So we can save that. Now there are actually 2 other things that we need to change with this, but I'm not going to do that right now because I want you to see what happens when we don't. So we're going to save that for a little bit later. So we're going to get out of the bullet, and we're going to go to, let's bring Mambu back over. I think we need to do something next with him. Actually, what we're going to do is we're going to code him. So we're going to bring up the Mambu controller, and if you don't have it open, just go to your scripts and double click on it, and it should open up in Visual Studio. So with Mambu, one sec. We need the start and we need the update. So we're going to add in some variables here. 3 for starters, which are going to be our components. First one's an animator. Spell. So an animator. The next one is a rigid body. And then we need our enemy controller. Then we need a couple of bools. First one is going to be, that is facing right stuff. So we need to know if he's going to be facing right or if he's facing left. And then we need another one to know whether he's shooting or not. And we'll see how this is going to work when we get to that point. 3 floats. First float is a timer for while he is open. It's going to define basically or determine how long the animation he's open for is going to keep that playing before he goes back to being closed. And then the opposite of that, which is the closed timer. So that'll be the timer for how long he stays closed before he goes open. And then a timer on how long it'll be to wait for before he actually shoots. So these are 3 timers. They all kind of play with each other a little bit, and we're going to see how those are used. Then we need 4 public floats. First one is going to be the move speed. We're going to default that to 1. Now these are values I've already determined, and you can obviously, tinker with them and see what kind of results you get. So I'm just going to leave them as this, and you can do that on your own. So the next one's a public float, and that's going to be open delay. So this is going to define how long he stays open for, and that's going to be 1 second. And another public float, which is going to be closed delay, and this is going to be for how long he stays closed for, and we're going to do that for 1.5 seconds. And then another public float, and this is going to be the shoot delay, and this is going to be how long to wait after he opens up to wait before he shoots. And we're going to do that at 0.5 second. Then we are going to create a public enum, and we're going to call it Mambu state. So Mambu has 2 states. He's open and he's closed. So we're going to create a state of those, or an enum of those. So we're going to have one called closed and one called open. And then we need a public of Mambu state called Mambu state, so that we can actually select what he's going to be, if he's closed or not, or if he's closed or opened. We're going to default to being closed. So when he starts out, his shell's closed, and then he's going to count down, he's going to open up, fire, go back to closed, and it's going to keep going over and over and over until he dies or leaves the scene. Then we're going to bring in those move directions, and I had such a hard time in the last video trying to explain what they were, so I'm just going to type this out real quick first, and then I'm going to keep it simple this time. And we're going to call it, no, it's not lowercase, it's capital, and then we're going to create a serialized of that, move directions. And that one's the lowercase one to start. Move direction, and we're going to default to him moving left. So what? I don't know why I had such a hard time explaining this. Left and right. If it's left, it means he's going to travel negative x-axis. He's going to go left across the screen. Right? Positive x, he's going to go right across the screen. I don't know why I kept saying left, right, right, left. It's either he's going to go left or he's going to go right. So he's going to go left or he's going to go right. So simple as that. All right, so that's the header. So now we're going to go into start. And then we have to get our components. So we're going to start with the enemy controller. So with the enemy controller, we need to get the enemy controller that is attached to our game object. And then we're going to get the animator from the enemy controller. So get component, actually, enemy controller. Enemy controller dot get component animator, and then our rigid body from the enemy controller. Okay, so there. Let's make sure that looks right. Yep. All right. So then, this is what we did in our last enemies. Our last 2 enemies is facing right. We know our sprite sheet defaults to right, so we're going to default our variable to right. But then we're going to check the move direction. So if the move direction is equal to left, then we're going to switch it up. Otherwise, we don't need to switch it up because we already know it's going right. So is facing right is actually going to be false. And we're going to use the enemy controller's flip function. Then we're going to flip the sprite on the, we're going to rotate it 180 degrees so it goes the other direction. Then we're going to initialize, or is shooting, to false because we know we're not shooting at first. And then we're going to do some things with the states of Mambu. So if Mambu, his state is equal to closed, one sec. Let's see here. If he's closed, then we're going to initialize his close timer to the close delay. So we're going to set that, I think that was 1.5 seconds. And then else if, it could be used else, but we're just going to use else if because he only has 2 states. But if he's open, then we're going to set his open timer to the value of open delay, which was, I believe, 1 second. So there, that's our initialization. So he's not shooting, and then we set the timers if he's closed, the close timer, or the open if he's open to the open timer value. So next, we're going to go to our update. And in our update, we're going to first start out with that freeze function, or the freeze variable. So if freeze enemy is true, we're going to return and do nothing. Now, unlike Peppy and Killer Bomb, where they needed time compensations because otherwise their calculated movements went to crap, this guy doesn't have that problem. So all we're going to do in here is just return. Okay, so now we're going to get on to his states and his animations. So we're going to switch on his states. So Mambu state, and we know he only has 2 states. So first state being closed. And we're just going to copy that and put it to open. All right, let's start with this closed state. So the first thing we want to do is play his closed animation, which we know we called it Mambu closed. So the first thing we're going to do is play the closed animation. While he's closed, he moves. So we're going to change the velocity of him, and we're going to say new vector 2. Inside of here, we need to know which direction we're going to go. So is he going to go right or is he going to go left? So let's just fill that in real quick. All right, so is facing right. If he's facing right, then his move speed will be positive because he's going to be moving positive across, so positive x. So we're going to just leave move speed how it is, as positive. However, if is facing right is false, which means he's going left, we want our move speed to be negative. So this is our x velocity, so it's going to be determined by this. So going right, positive, going left is negative. His y, which we don't actually mess around with, we're just going to use the current velocity of y and just leave that as is. So that's his movement. So while he is moving, he is having he needs his time, how long he's staying closed for, his time to go down. So that's where we're going to subtract from our close timer, time.delta time. So that's going to tick down every time as he's closed. It's going to tick, 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 tick. And then when it gets down, if his close timer goes below 0, then what we're going to do is we're going to change our state, because now we know we should go open. We should open up. And then we're going to set our open timer to the value of the delay. And then we're also going to set our shoot timer to the value of our shoot delay. So we're going to set our 2 timers. So after this is set, next pass through on the update, well, we're not closed anymore, so now we're going to be open. So what are we going to do while we're open? Well, first thing we're going to do is we're going to play our open animation. So animator.play. So Mambu open. So we're going to play our open animation. Next, well, while we're open, we don't move. So we're going to change our velocity. Rigid body 2D velocity is going to be equal to a new vector 2 with no x movement and keep the same y. So velocity of y. So now we're staying at the y, although we locked it, it doesn't really make a difference. But we're going to note no horizontal movement and keep the same y. So once we have that done, we're going to start with our shoot timer. So we're going to count down on our shoot timer. So we're going to minus time.delta time. And once we get below 0 or on 0, right below 0, we want to shoot. But we also want to shoot if we're not already shooting. So what this flag basically does is, what this flag is basically saying is that we want to shoot only once. So once we're in here, we're going to first start off with this shooting. That's going to be equal to true. So next pass through, we already know it's below 0, but it's true, so it will only happen one time. And then here, we're going to call a function that we haven't created yet. It's going to be called shoot bullet, and we're going to set that there. After that, there's a second timer that we have to worry about, which is our open timer. So while we're open and doing all the shooting, or just sitting there until we do shoot, we want to subtract time from that one. So now the open timer is counting down while the shoot timer was counting down. And if our open timer is also less than 0, we want to change our state again. So Mambu state is going to be equal to closed now. So we're done being open, we're going to go back to closed. And with going back to closed, we're going to set the closed timer to the value of the closed delay. And we're going to say is shooting goes back to false. So there. So as simple as it looks, this is all that there is to creating Mambu. He's either closed or he's open. And while he's closed, you play an animation, you move him across the screen, and while he's moving, you're counting down for how long he's going to be moving for. And then when that stops, you're going to switch him to open and set those timers up. And while he's open, he doesn't move. Tick, tick, tick while he's open till before he starts shooting his bullets. And after he shoots his bullets, this flag is not going to let it happen again, so it's only a one-time deal. And while he's open, you're going to count down for how long he can stay open for. And when that passes, boom, he goes back to being closed and it starts all over. So that's pretty easy. So now we're going to go back down here and we're going to create a public void, which is what we used in the other enemies, which is the set move direction. So if you wanted to change his move direction in code, this function will let you do that. So ideally, perhaps this should have been like put into the base enemy class, but you know, we can always work that out later if we need to. But right now, we're just going to keep it so that it's in each enemy that we create. So set the move direction equal to whatever we're being passed, so either left or right. Then we're going to check and do all that flipping again. So this is just like the other two enemies. So move direction is equal to move directions dot left. So we're going to check and see if we're going left. Otherwise, we'll check and see if we're going right. So we'll put in the else. So if we're going left, but we're facing right, it means we want to flip. So is facing right is equal to not is facing right. So we invert the variable and we tell the enemy controller to flip. And then here, we're going to just copy this because it's basically the same. However, we've told it we want to go right, but we're already facing left. So we flip it, and so that we end up going right instead. So that's that function. So that's exactly like the other two enemies, so we put that in there too. Now we need our shoot bullet. So shooting a bullet is private. So we're going to say private void shoot bullet. All right, now in this function, what we're going to do is we're going to need to create 8 bullets. So if you watch the video on when we made the explosion for Megaman, so his death explosion, it's very much exactly the same concept. So we're going to create 8 bullets. So in that video, we created 8 explosions or 12 explosions. I can't remember. I think it was 12. And then we're going to create new 8 empty game objects. And then what we're going to do is we're going to create the vectors for these. So we're going to say vector2 array. We're going to call it bullet vectors. And we're going to have to define all these vectors. That should be a lot of fun. So we're going to say new vector2, and then we're just going to just put zeros right here, and then we're going to copy this because we need 8 of them. So let's copy, and then we're going to go boom, 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 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Get rid of this comma at the end of that one. Okay, so our vectors are going to basically be up, down, left, right, and then when we have up left, up right, down left, down right. So those are the 8 bullets that basically come from the center of Mambu and then go in those directions. So let's start with left. So left is going to be -1 on the X, nothing on the Y. And then we'll go right, so which is a +1 on the X, nothing on the Y. If we want our bullet to go, let's see, we're going to have it go down. So that's a -1 on the Y, but not 0 on the X. And if we want to go up, it's +Y, 1 on the Y, 0 on the X. So that's the cross. Now we need the diagonals. So the diagonals is we're going to start with going left and down. So we're going to put 0.75f negative, and bottom going negative on the Y is also 0.75f. And then we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to go left and up. So that's going to be, or I mean, sorry, yeah, left and up. So negative 0.75f, but it's going to be a positive 0.75. Then we're going to go right and down. Well, right and down is going to be positive on the X, but negative on the Y. And then the last one is going to be a positive on the X, which this is going to be right and up, and that's going to be positive on the Y. So these are our 8 bullet directions that we've created. So after that, we need to initialize them. And this is the fun stuff. So what we're going to do is say int I is equal to 0, and it's going to be I is less than bullets dot length, which should give us back 8, and then we're going to increment through those bullets. So while we're incrementing for the bullets, we need to instantiate the bullets. So first, so bullets of I is going to be equal. So we're going to create the bullet first. So we're going to instantiate a bullet. So where do we get the bullet? Well, we're going to get it from our enemy controller, the bullet prefab that we created earlier. So enemy controller.bullet prefab. There. So that's the start. Next, we want to name the bullet. So bullets I dot name, because I don't like clone and all that other stuff. So we're going to enemy controller dot bullet prefab dot name. Next, we're going to set the position. Where is the bullet going to basically spawn from or originate from? So that's going to be bullets of I, and then that's going to be the transform's position. Where are we going to do that? Well, that's why we created that bullet shoot position inside the enemy controller too. So enemy controller bullet shoot position dot transform dot position. So that's going to define where our bullet's going to originate from. Now these next parts are going to be basically similar to what we've been doing with Megaman, and what it's going to be is we're going to be calling the BulletScript components. So bullets of I, and then we're going to do get component BulletScript. And then what we're going to do first is we're going to set the bullet type. So set bullet type, and that's going to be, now this guy, he's bittersweet, aka pink. So we're going to use the mini pink bullet, which matches his nice color. And then I'm going to do a lot of copy and paste on this because I don't feel like typing these all out. So then we're going to set the damage value. And where's that at? Set damage value is going to be the enemy controllers, which was called bullet damage. And then next, so we want the bullet damage, we want the bullet speed. So set bullet speed. That's also in the enemy controller, so bullet speed. Then we want to set the direction of the bullet. That's from the vector. So we're going to use bullet vectors. So whichever bullet vector we're on from the for loop. And then we're going to set what tag are we going to collide with. Well, we know for a fact that the enemy, when he's shooting, he's going to be shooting and he's going to want to hit Megaman, which is the player tag. So we're going to set the player tag. And then we're going to do one more thing, which we defaulted all of our destroy times to 2 seconds in the bullet. But what we're going to do is we're going to bump that up. I'll show you why later. But we're going to bump up the set destroy time to 5 seconds. So our bullets stay around a lot longer. And you're going to see in the game manager how we're going to fiddle around with that. And last but not least is to actually shoot the bullet. So now we set up all these parameters for the bullet, we can finally shoot it. So these are all the changes that we're going to do for shooting the bullet. But we have one last one that we need to do, which is actually by calling the sound manager, because we want to actually listen to a boom when that bullet shoots. And we're going to play the clip. What clip is that? Well, it's the one that we set in the enemy controller. And that was called shoot bullet clip. So that one, which was called enemy shoot, I believe. And I forgot what number sound file it was, but then we're going to play that. So this is our shoot bullet function for Mambu. So we defined the 8. These are all the trajectories that the bullet's going to travel. And through each bullet that we create, we set it up. And basically, they're all identical except for the direction it's going to go, which is determined by the array of vectors that we set up here. So these, the damage and the speed are exposed through the inspector, and we're going to just hard code it to pink because that's the color that this guy shoots. So, and the position's based off the child game object of our Mambu object. Right now it's in basically the center where the pivot is. Well, it's in the center, but when he switches to his open animation, it still looks like it's like the center because that's where we defined it. All right, last but not least, this guy, it's not like a huge class, but he's got a couple more things. So what we're going to do now is we need to create a couple more private voids. And these are going to have to do with his animation and being invincible. So the first one is going to be called start invincible animation. I'm just going to copy that because I don't like typing that out. And this one's going to be called stop. Same thing, but stop and start. Now in here, what we're going to do is we're going to use our invincible function from our enemy controller. And when we start being invincible, we want to say it's true. And when we want to stop being invincible, we're going to say it's false. So we're going to use these in our animation. So when he's closed, and we're going to do that through animation events. So when he's closed, we're going to set our invincibility to true. And when he's open, we're going to set our invincibility to false. So this is basically the Mambu script. So let's save that. We're going to go back over to Unity. And in Unity, let's zoom this out a little bit. We're gonna bring this over, and we can leave that where it is. Let's bring this over. Let's select him. Let's drag him over here. Let's have him start out. So let's bring this up a little bit. All right, let's give it a go. We'll see what happens. All right, look at that. So he's shooting, but you're going to notice a couple things. Let's stop that. You saw the bullet was staying still and the other ones were all going horizontal. Well, that had to do with what I was mentioning earlier with our bullet prefab. So let's go over to our projectiles and open up the bullet. And we can just bring this over here. And then we're going to go down to our rigid body. So when we originally created our bullet, we knew that Megaman, his bullets don't go in weird directions. It's always horizontal across the screen. So when we created our bullet, we locked the Y position on the constraint. So what we want to do is first unlock the Y on our bullet. So now the bullet can travel in other directions. So let us go back and try that again. But there is one more thing. Check it out. So now let's watch. So now when he fires, it almost looks like fireworks. So let's stop that. So now the bullets are they're able to travel on the Y now, but now they're doing something weird. And what that is that, let's open the bullet back up again. What's happening is gravity is affecting our bullets. So back over on the rigid body, what we're going to do is we're going to change our bullets to kinematic so that they're not affected by gravity. So now, if we're to save those changes, go back and play it one more time. So now Mambu comes around, boom, there goes bullets in all 8 different directions. So looks like it's doing what it should be doing. And hit direction, also, when it gets hit by the bullet, it's pushing him in the opposite direction. So that's working as well. That was the hit side. And play it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring him down a little bit so he's on the level of Megaman, so we don't have to jump and stuff to try to hit him. So let's play it one more time. Put it on Invincible, just so that, let's zoom in here. Well, I killed him. I think his shell was closed. We'll start it one more time. Put it on Invincible. Shoot, shoot, shoot. Well, that's not supposed to happen. So what we need to do now is we're going to go and do that thing with the animation events I was talking about. So let's get that out of the way. So select Mambu, and right now we're already on the animations up here. So on closed, on our first frame here, you see this little thing with a plus that says add event. You're going to click on that. It's going to put this, you can't really see it, but there's this little tick here where the this bar is. And once you have that, you're going to see this thing over here on the side that says function. And what it does is it shows you all the functions that you have in your scripts that you can use. So we created one called start invincible animation and stop. So when he's closed, we want to have this function get fired. So we're going to say start invincible animation. So now if we go over to open, it's the same thing. We're going to add an event there. And there's nothing selected, but when he opens up, we don't want him to be invincible. So we're going to say stop invincible animation. And we're going to save that. And we can bring this back over, and we're going to try that one more time. So let's play that. We're going to put ourselves in invincible though. So now he's going to come over, he's going to shoot, we're going to fire. Oh, look at that. Oh, and as soon as he opened up, he became vulnerable and we killed him with our bullet. So let's do it one more time. Center on Invincible, us, shoot, 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 open, closed, and then shoot, and he's still open, and he was vulnerable, and he died. So that's how you use animation events. There's an enemy called Screwdriver. They also call him Screw Bomber. You can use that for his firing pattern because he has a certain length that his animation plays while he's open. And what you can do is add in the shoot bullet event at certain points when his animation, and they'll shoot. So that's basically why this is good. Now technically, I could have basically did this. I could have just called this function over in Mambu Controller. So when he's closed, I could have just called enemy controller, said start invincible animation, or I could just said .invincible true here, and I could have called here. But what I wanted to do is I want to show you how to use animation events in here, because I don't think Big Eye has any. I can't remember when I wrote him. I'm pretty sure he doesn't have any animation events, but I want to introduce you to that. So that's how you create animation events. So you can call a function inside of your animation and have it do something while it's playing. So, okay, so that's that part. Then we're going to move on to making a couple of tweaks to our game manager. So let us go over to the game manager. Actually, let's just do this. Go to scripts, move this out of the way, double click on the game manager, and then that comes up. So let's go to, actually, here. So in the last video, we created these, we got these coordinates that basically define when right to the left of the camera view and to the right of the camera view. And we use this so that once our enemy left the visible range, we took him and moved him to the other side. So it's kind of like how you see in the game where once the enemy user basically just moves him to the other side until he dies, and sometimes they spawn him again, and then they keep moving to the left. So we're going to expand on this camera thing, and what we're going to do is we're going to create a struct to have all the coordinates. So right now I only cared about the left and the right, but we're going to care about the left, the right, the top, and the bottom. So if we ever wanted to know if something left the top of the view or if it left the bottom of the view, along with the left and the right. So we're going to go up to the top here, and we have to create a struct. And we're going to do it right there. And so what we're going to call it is public struct world view coordinates. And it's only going to have 4 floats. First one's going to be called top. I'm just going to copy this and just change the names. So it's going to be the top, which means the up here, the right, which is going to be on the right side of the view, and then we're going to have the bottom, which is obviously the bottom, and the left, which is obviously the left. So these are all going to be holding values for outside of the camera range of the top, the left, the right, and the bottom. And we're going to create a public, and we're making this public because maybe we want to use this in other places in our game. So not just specifically in the game manager, maybe we want to have our character be able to pull these values and do something. So we're going to make this public. And then world view coordinates, and we're going to call it world view coords. All right, so now what we need to do is we're going to create a function. We're going to come down here. We want to do that. We'll do it maybe before this. Yeah, we're going to do it before reposition enemies. So we're going to do private void get world view coordinates. And then space there. Okay, so in here, what we're going to do is we're going to take this. This doesn't need to be there anymore, but we're going to drop it up in here. And what we're going to do is first, we're going to just call it WV0, WorldView0, and WorldView1. But what we're going to do is this is going to get us the left, but with this, we're also going to get the top. So negative 0.1 f, so that's going to be the top outside of the camera. And then this is the right of the camera, and then we're going to want outside the bottom view. So this is more like left bottom and top right. So now these two variables are going to have the left, the right, the top, and the bottom amongst them. So now what we want to do is populate our variable that was based off our structure up top. So world view coordinates dot left. We're just going to do this 2, 4. Then we want the bottom, right, and the top. Bottom, right, and the top. So now the left is going to be wv0.x. The bottom is going to be wv0.y. The right is going to be wv1.x. And the top is going to be wv1.y. So once we have these values, we're going to drop them into the structure. So now we can just check the structure, because this is going to basically now, once we take this, it's going to run up here where our right before reposition enemies. So we're going to get those coordinates. While the game is running and it's not over, we're going to get those coordinates of the outside the camera range. So then we're going to go back over to reposition enemies. We're going to have to fix this up. But before we do that, we're going to create a case for our enemy Mambu. Because we want him, when he's outside the camera range, we want him to move too. So let's just copy this for right now. Now he doesn't have this following path, so we just care about his transform. And what we're going to use on his is we're going to use negative 0.09. Let me just move over here real quick. And 0.7. These are values I came up with, so he's not too high. He's not going to be outside of camera range. He's not going to be below camera range. So we're going to use those. But these are now going to be changed. So this is actually going to be the world view coordinates left. So this is going to be, well, that's right, but world coordinates dot left. No, wait, right. Sorry, it's supposed to be right. We check the left, but we use the right when we're removing these guys. There we go. So we're going to see if the enemy's outside the left, and then we're going to move them to the right. So let's save that. Let's go back over to our game, and we're going to play this and see what happens. Invincible. There. So we move to the other side of the screen like we were expecting. Alright, so what we're going to do now is our guy is done. So we're going to zero all that out, and we're going to make a prefab out of him. So go to your prefab enemy folder and drag Mambu in there. So now with Mambu created as a prefab, we're going to add a couple more of him. Highlight the one, Control D, or you can drag him in there a couple times. So we're going to rename those. All right. Then we're going to move them. So let's just highlight all of them. Let's just drag these above Peppy. And we're going to move all these over here outside of camera range. And we're going to start them out being about the height of Megaman. So we're going to just drop them right there. So we're going to pick the second one, drag that over a little bit, and then the third one, drag that over to about there. All right, so that's that. Now let's play it. We're on Invincible. Now you're going to notice how some of these bullets, they disappear actually. Maybe they don't. Maybe that's just me. But if you do zoom out, you see they're all going for 5 seconds now. You got bullets all over the place. So now we're going to take advantage of that, the coordinates again of our viewing area. So, but before we do that, I want to make one change, and you're going to make this change too. Pull up your player controller script and go to your shoot bullet. And right here after the vector stuff, you can copy this. And much like Mambu, we're going to set the destroy time, the delay to 5 seconds here also as well. So save that. Okay. So now we're going to go back here. And play it. The reason we do it, that we make it 5 seconds, is because if you keep going this direction, actually let's go here. You see those bullets that keep going to the left there? That when I was all the way over to the end? If it was at 2 seconds, those were going to end up disappearing. So we just extend it out, because there's no way that Megaman's going to outrun that bullet. We keep it for 5 seconds just so that that bullet can stay on the screen, because if it's at 2 seconds and he's running across the screen all the way here, it's going to disappear before he gets to where it stops. So that's why we extend to 5 seconds. But now we have all these bullets that are going to be living for 5 seconds, but we're going to take care of that now. So if we're going back over to the game manager, we're going to create another function, and this function we're going to call is destroy stray bullets. So private void destroy stray bullets. So we don't want our bullets to just keep floating around indefinitely, or at least for those 5 seconds. So what we're going to do is we're going to go and look for all those bullets, and we're going to check and see whether they're in camera range or not, or camera view or not. So game object dot find game objects plural with tag, and we're looking for what? We're looking for bullet. That hasn't changed. So we're going to get all those bullets. We're going to for each through them. And so game object bullet in bullets. And so what we're going to do is we're going to check and see if the bullet is outside of the camera range. So if the bullet dot transform position dot x is less than the world view coordinates dot left, or, and then I'm just going to copy this and make, because we need this for the left, the right, the top, and the bottom. So 1, 2, 3. So what we want to do is see if, or, so if the x is less than the left, it's outside of range, or the x is greater than the right, it's out of range, or the y is greater than the top, or the y is less than the bottom. So if it's true on any of these cases, the bullet is out of the camera's view. So we're going to say, if that's the case, hey, guess what? We're going to destroy the bullet. Bye-bye bullet. So save that. But now we need to call this. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that function. I'm going to go up here to where we have our game loop right here, and after reposition enemies, we're going to destroy stray bullets. So we're going to get the coordinates, remove the enemies around, and if there are any bullets outside of the camera view, remove them. So now let's go back over here. Let's bring this over a little bit. I'm going to zoom it out so you can see, and let's play it. Invincible. Now if you see over here, these bullets that are being shot by these guys, they're obviously out of view. So they weren't coming. Now you see they're disappearing. So they're not going all over the place. They're not going out for 5 seconds. So what we're going to do is, you see those 2 bullets? That one made it all the way to the end. And then if my bullet was at 2 seconds, my bullet's leaving too. And then the bullet, keep going up. I didn't make it. Couldn't make it as faster than the bullet was traveling. So that's how you can keep your bullets going, and once they leave the screen, basically they'll disappear. Now, why? Well, I don't know if you noticed in one of the previous videos, when I was shooting bullets and there were those static peppy penguins sitting here, I could have just shot 5 bullets one by one, just do while I was staying over here, and they would have all died. I would have walked across the screen, they would have been gone. So that's another thing. You don't want your bullet traveling, if it gets outside the camera range, just remove it so it doesn't touch anything that happens to be outside of the camera range as well. So you want your bullets to only cause damage that are when they're visible inside the camera. So that's another reason, or another use for this. So we don't want our bullets to basically hit those Mambus, so let's check it out. So I'm going to shoot. Oh, he's dead. So you see, I can't hit him. Oh, well, that one, yeah. So that's the point of that. And you can tweak that if that's too far out. You can tweak that with the function that we created, which was the get world view coordinates. So if you think 0.1 is too far out, you can try 0.05, and that'll bring it in closer to right where the edge of the camera is. So you can toy with these variables and get them closer so that they don't travel as far as they did. So that brings us to the end. So we have a new enemy, Mambu, and in the next video we're going to be doing Big Eye, and then that'll wrap up the enemies, and then we'll move on to 2 other things after that, and then that'll basically be where we halt the series, and then I go back to development, and you can work on building your own little Megaman, and I'll be introducing all little videos here and there of basically like little things you can add in, like start screen, etc. So if you found this useful, give it a thumbs up. If you like it, subscribe, so then you can also follow me on Twitter, which it's in my channel info. So I post when I basically put these videos out, which is every week, and then once we're done with Megaman, we'll move on to a different game. I'm thinking maybe Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, like a copy of that, but I'm not sure yet. So source code's on GitHub, so if you want, you can go download the source code. Anyway, take care. I'll see you at the next video. Bye.